I love TakeGraphs.
I got to make sure it's not going to get me sued, which I don't actually know.
I think it's like dumb Starbucks, right? Like
yeah, basic. I mean, that's
also,
basically
you
the
work
idea,
for them.
right?
Like you can. I feel like you can ask this one. Be like, can we be TakeGraphs? Like this is fine.
I
It's
do
all
like
good fun. It's
I
not
do
negative.
like that idea. Actually, here's an overreaction. If the Blue Jays can't get their rotation in order, they are not going to make the playoffs. There we go. And part of that is the two main issues they have right now are Chris Bassett's coming out throwing like 2 miles an hour under his average velocity, which is a problem. And Jose Berrios clearly is not better. Like, and that's one thing too, where I think it's easier to feel like you're overreacting there, because it's like, this isn't like based off of one bad start. Like, this isn't based off like, you know, Jacob deGrom having a terrible opening day start and going, he's finished, he's done, his arm is trash. Like, no, he came back today and he struck out 11 guys in 6 innings. He's still Jacob deGrom, as it turns out. But Berrios is doing exactly what we saw last year, exactly what we saw in the WBC, and exactly what we saw in spring training. Throwing a billion hittable fastballs right down the pike with no real chance of success on them. So I think, you know, I don't remember when we talked about the Blue Jays how much, if at all, we talked about, you know, the back of that rotation is kind of like there's some potential issues there.
We were just like, the offense is too good. Like the offense
is great. The offense is very clearly great, but this was a problem, I think, for the Blue Jays going into the season was Berrios and potentially then also the fifth starter, which right now is Yusei Kikuchi, who pitched okay against the Royals, but the Royals are a very bad offense, so I don't know how much you can take out of that. And at the same time, like, Bassett, I think, was kind of the hinge there. Bassett, I think, was the one where it's like, if Bassett is good, this team will be fine. If Bassett struggles, this team is in real trouble, because they only have really 2 reliable starters right now, it feels like, in Alek Manoah and Kevin Gausman. So there's my overreaction that if the Blue Jays cannot get better starting pitching than what they've gotten so far, they will not make the playoffs. But you know what's funny? That doesn't even feel like an overreaction. That just feels true. Like, that's just the case. Like, if you only have 2 good starters out of 5, you're probably not going to make the playoffs.
This is incredible. Like, John is out here workshopping and getting closer and closer to coming out with his overreaction.
The Mets are going to be a last place team. Let's go with that one. That's not actually possible, because the Nationals are an absolute disaster. Oh my goodness.
Oh, well, CJ Abrams just made another error while we were recording this podcast.
Aww.
Atlanta kid, but man, that he struggled in that opening weekend. That kid.
It's really something when bad teams force players to do stuff that they're just clearly not capable of doing, and someone in the Nationals organization was clearly like, no, he can do this. I understand the idea that
feels very Mondesi to me. Remember when Mondesi got called up super quick and it was all over? He just loses all of his confidence and he just never really recovered.
Part of me thinks I understand the idea of let the guy fail off the position, you know, give him the challenge, and if he doesn't meet it, then okay, you reassess your options and move forward. But when you have pretty much every evaluator in agreement that this dude is just not a shortstop, he's not going to be able to play the position, it's not where he should be, and the Nationals are insisting on doing it anyway. This is, I think, a thing we've talked about with the Nationals, where it's like the decision-making process for that team. And granted, it's a mess right now because no one really seems to be in charge.
And they're not selling until after the season, where you're like,
well, they're not selling until the Mason dispute with the Orioles is resolved, and that's been an ongoing court thing for the last decade, basically.
I was gonna say, when I saw that, I was like, that can't be a sticking point, because I don't think that's getting resolved. Like, I don't know. Are you just going to hold the team hostage for years?
Essentially, I mean, that's what this whole Mason thing has been for the longest time, and there's no real reason that the Orioles are just going to, unless something weird happens with the Orioles, and granted, Orioles ownership is not exactly made itself sound good over the last year.
Which is also weird. I'm reading the Joe Torre book with Verducci, the Yankee years. And reading in like the early part of like the Orioles, or obviously they were great in the mid 90s and 95, 96, and when the Yankees won, and they didn't, I don't know who they beat in the World Series in 96. The team escapes me in that regard. So
no one can remember truly.
Like many of us forget. And the Orioles had the number 2 payroll, and it's just like this thing. And then I'm just going back through it. It's like, it's just hard to imagine that the Baltimore Orioles were just this powerhouse, and they spent all this money. Well, because now in 2023, they're like, look, we don't have the funds. Look, we can't do it. We can't do anything this offseason. I think Grayson Rodriguez, so maybe that's nice.
It feels like a situation like with any other team where someone bought them and then passed it down essentially to their fail sons. Yeah. That Peter Angelos clearly cared more about baseball in Baltimore and about fielding a winning team in Baltimore than John Angelos does. I don't think he really cares. I kind of get the feeling that if the Orioles win, he'll be like, great, that's great. And if the Orioles don't win, he'll be like, whatever, as long as I didn't spend too much money in the process. You know, that is the vibe I get off of John Angelos, and one of those things that makes, again, one of those dangers of having one of those owners where their plan is just to give it to their family, to give the team to the family eventually. You don't know what you're going to end up with. You don't know if you're going to end up with a Kendall Roy in charge.
The best case scenario for those is that they're not interested and they just hire well. They're just like, I don't want to be involved, but here's the keys, Brian Cashman. Here's the keys. Insert smart mind here, and
but then more likely is you end up with a guy like Chris Ilitch, who just not only doesn't care but doesn't want to spend the money involved to make the team. And it's one of those things where then sell it, sell the team. You almost want to tell the Angelos family, if you're really this unpleasant about Baltimore, then just sell the team already. What are you holding on to this for? But anyway, okay, there's my overreaction. The Orioles are going to get sold. That's not even an overreaction to anything. That's just me just not liking the Angelos family. But anyway.
I love it, John. 1 week team study series. So we're going to do 2 a week and just kind of check in on those 2 particular teams and what's going on, how they did and how they fared. The Dodgers, 4-2. You mentioned Trace Thompson, 3 homers, slugging really well. We joked about it in the offseason. We're like, are they really going to Trace Thompson? It's like, oh, because it's the Dodgers. And they're just like, well, they're going to do Dodger things.
They always do Dodgers things.
They always do Dodger things. How have they looked, and your positives and negatives through 6 games for LA?
Well, I think if you want to look at the positives, and we talked a lot about how with the losses the Dodgers had this offseason, the fact that they weren't really all that active in the free agent market, that you're looking at guys like Thompson and James Outman and Miguel Vargas and being like, you sure that's what you're going to go with? That's what you want in your lineup? It turns out the Dodgers know what they're doing with that regard. James Outman looks like a viable caliber major league hitter at the very least against right-handed pitching. Miguel Vargas turns out he has a very good eye at the plate. He's got a walk rate over 50% right now, which obviously is not going to hold for the entire season. He's not Barry Bonds, but it shows that there is some level of talent there that is legitimate. I think similarly, with Thompson, it's like he's never been a guy who's been known to be a patient guy at the plate, but he's always had a ton of power in his bat. He's always been, had a quick bat, and you saw that with the 3 home runs against Arizona. But I think, similar to the Rays, I think the Dodgers are one of those teams that, even if the ingredients are subpar, so to speak, or even if it's not all-stars all around the diamond, they're still so adept at finding the combinations of guys who essentially put together work in that capacity. Just either it's platoons everywhere, or either it's taking advantage of some level of some defensive inefficiency to put a guy somewhere where he's better than what he looks like, or it's something whatever.